Let's say I want to ask my manager for a raise or a promotion, something big.
Mhm.
What would be the best way to approach this based on your findings? Should I send an email first or just go straight to face to face? What would be the best approach for big asks from our coworker or manager? Hi everyone, my name is Ehsan, and in this video I'm going to talk about how important the face-to-face interaction is, especially if you want to ask for a favor or a request, even if that person is your friend. It was almost 3 weeks ago that I published a video on how inefficient our networking strategy can be if we rely 100% on sending emails or messages or any sort of text-based communication. And when I was trying to make that video, I found myself to go on the Harvard Business Review on, and there was one research lab at Toronto Metropolitan University that was specifically working on this topic. And these are the 3 articles that I cited, specifically this one on the right, how face-to-face interaction is 34 times more effective than email. So I reached out to the PI of that research lab. He is Mahdi Roghanizad, and I invited him to a talk because he is the expert in this field. He has published many papers in top journals, and most of them has been featured at Harvard Business Review, and he has worked on how this digital communication can be used to influence people, to build the trust, and how to make social judgments using these platforms. I divided our conversation into 4 parts. The first one, we are going to talk about why email feels easy and why we do that. Then we are going to talk about the psychology of asking for help. Then we are going to talk about how this face-to-face interaction will impact the remote workers. And finally, we are going to discuss how the face-to-face interaction is important, especially if you have something big to ask, any promotion, any raise in your salary, how to use the face-to-face to get a yes. This is going to be a long video, and I'm going to put the sections in the description below so you can jump to the section that is interesting to you. Without further ado, let's go to the part 1, which is why email feels easier. Let's say people have read your research papers, they know they have to do a face-to-face versus any other sort of communication. But why people default into those type of communications versus a face-to-face?
I believe there are some kind of obvious reasons why people prefer to go for mediated communications, particularly for computer mediated communications. Well, convenience probably is the most important one. And if we are looking at virtual teams and organizations with geographically very spread structure, then it often becomes a necessity. So they have to actually communicate with the team members and other members of the organization through mediated communication. But one thing that is not as obvious as these 2 reasons is that people shy away from asking, particularly when it comes to asking for a favor or a help, or I have a question, I am not 100% sure if that target person is willing to answer or not. I use mediated communication, particularly the asynchronous mode of it, to give enough space, psychological space, to the target person to first, if they don't want to answer, I don't want to push them too much, and also if they want to think about their answer, they will have time and space to think about it. So these are the embarrassment is one, or the third reason why people, even if face-to-face is equally available and feasible, maybe some people still prefer to go for email or a voice message because they are embarrassed, they're shying away from having a real-time face-to-face conversation.
And do you think people have the same idea or mindset that they are as effective as they are with the communication through email as they are in person? Most of people might think, what's the difference? It's the same. I'm asking a person something over the email, and this is going to be the same kind of effectiveness on that person if I do it face to face. Why people think that's the right mindset?
Yeah, I mean, Well, I mean, the data says exactly the same. So it says that people don't predict that any type of mediated communication would be less effective than face-to-face. Or at least the amount of difference that they perceive is much smaller than the actual difference. Even if they are approaching friends. And this is very important. Maybe some people can imagine when you are sending an email to a stranger for a variety of reasons, that person may ignore your email, security reason, or you name it, right? But even if you are asking a friend for help or a request or whatever you have in mind, it's very different. The effectiveness is different. So that's the fact. Why it happens, or why we have this misjudgment or misprediction about the effectiveness of mediated communication, is mostly because this egocentric prediction that we have in social behavior of others. So we assume that for them, we as another person are as close, as understandable, as effective as we are for ourselves. And that is why we call it egocentrism. When we are trying to predict someone else's behavior, we don't do enough adjustment to have their perception of the world. We automatically consider that they see the world the same way that we do. And obviously, I see myself as a honest person, trustworthy, with someone who actually have a real question, real need, and we again automatically assume that the other person will have the same idea, which is not the case. Regardless of their closeness relationship with them, I mean, if they're a friend or the stranger, doesn't matter really. They will look at us very different than we look at ourselves.
Yeah, I always feel the same way. I think like maybe the way that I'm looking at this request or ask is the same as someone else asked me the same request. So maybe, yeah, that point of view is different. But what are the other factors that push me or convince me to go to a communication over the email or text or voice versus a face-to-face? Are there any fear of rejection or any kind of deeper factors that push me to go to that default mode to do it, or is this anything else?
Yeah, so if we continue that idea of embarrassment that I mentioned earlier, what underlies that, what actually bring about this embarrassment is that what if I am rejected? So let's say I'm asking for help, I'm asking for a favor from someone, being a friend or a stranger. Approaching someone with the request is somehow embarrassing, but what makes it much worse is the idea that I might be rejected at the end of the day. So that is something is very tough to handle. And there are other researches before the one that we did that shows that people are extremely afraid of that. And just to avoid that possible outcome, they don't go face to face to begin with. So that's definitely one of the reasons that push people to choose mediated communication over face to face.
So the takeaway for this part one for me is, if something matters to me, I should ask it in person, and email should be the backup, not the default that I'm gonna use that. So this is part one. Let's go to the part two, which is the psychology of asking for help. You have evaluated and compared different types of communication, let's say Zoom versus audio based or email. Was there any results that surprised you when we comparing this type of communication?
So, I mean, for the first time in the 2017 paper, the effect size that we got there, I mean, how less effective is an email compared to face-to-face request, was really shocking. Well, we kind of had some idea that most likely it's going to be less effective, but not that to this extent. So what we realized that face-to-face is 34 times more effective than an email request. That was a big shock. And then after that, we thought probably this effect will fade away when people ask friends, because that's, we call it psychological distance, is less. And then the friend who is going to ignore your email, they know that they're going to meet you sometime in the future again, right? Next day, next week. So maybe they think that, okay, if I ignore the email, if I reject the request, then what I'm going to do next time we meet. But it wasn't the case. So still, even for friends, when you're asking friends friends via email, still the effect size is very, very big. The difference between asking face-to-face and email, even from friends, is still very considerable and big.
I mean, asking any kind of favor or request is kind of awkward, even for in the professional environment. If I'm asking a coworker for something, but is there anything that we can do to make it easier?
Well, yes. There are research that shows that actually helpers will be happy to help. So although we believe that we are presenting ourselves as someone who is not competent, who is not confident, who does not know what they are doing, when you are approaching someone asking for help, this is what we see from ourselves, right? Again, egocentrism. But the other person, in most situations, people will be happy to help, very inclined to offer what you need, and that would be also embarrassing for them if they reject. So there are factors that we should consider, again, to push away that egocentrism. You can always think about what would be in the head of that helper when I'm approaching them for help. First of all, it's gonna be they're gonna feel good about themselves. These are all documented and researched for. So if someone can successfully offer something and help someone, that is a good feeling about themselves that they have. They will have a good social image after helping. And the last thing is that they're going to embarrass themselves if they say no right to your face. So there are much more reason for them to comply and offer help than we think. And if we are approaching someone with this idea, most likely it's going to be much easier for us to go for it and ask for help face to face.
I'm glad you brought that up, because I also have the same feeling. When I help someone, I feel good. That day I feel I have done something productive.
There you go.
Yeah. The takeaway from this part for me was most people enjoy helping you more than you expect. So it's better to ask, and ask face to face. Now let's go to the part 3, which is how this face to face interaction will impact the remote workers. So now going to the third part of our conversation, which is about the remote work, which it got promoted mostly after the COVID. So the normalizing working from home or doing some sort of hybrid or remote work became normalized, most importantly after the COVID. Mm-hmm. But now, because this kind of work inherently is different, right? So people have less face-to-face interaction. That's just the nature of this kind of work. So do you think that will cause some issue, people treating you different than the others?
So for the context that we are talking about right now, exactly when you are asking if, there's another paper published in IJIM, when you're asking for any kind of resource, my assumption right now for this question is that we are talking about the working context.
Yes.
So it could be help, it could be information, it could be asking about feedback, and any of them, I mean, we have shown that in another paper, any of them, if it happens in mediated communication, you're less likely to receive whatever you want to effectively do your job. So that's one thing. And then another thing that is probably a little bit slightly outside the area of requesting for help is that building trustworthy and relationships are not as easy as it is in a face-to-face. When you are working in virtual teams, particularly when you haven't met that person face-to-face, or it was a long time ago, it means that personal level of interaction that happens pretty quickly in face-to-face, it's not happening in the virtual teams, even if they're using or doing it on a video platforms. And very recent finding is that one of the abilities that we have as a human species, that we can actually have a good or better than chance accuracy to predict cooperativeness of the other person. So let's say that you are meeting a stranger for the first time, could be a job interview, it could be a new virtual team that is formed, and one of the first important questions that you want to to answer for yourself is that how reliable is that person? So I'm trying to, I will be working with them for the next, I don't know, months or years. How can I trust them? Are they cooperative or not? We have the ability to answer that question significantly better than chance when meet someone face to face for the first. But it goes away when that meeting happens on video, and we have tested that. So our prediction about cooperativeness of someone else in video is no better than chance, which has significant consequences for online working and remote or virtual teams, or even hiring in organizations.
And do you think because of this, managers might treat the people who work remotely different than the people who work in the office and they have more face-to-face interaction, even though it's just saying hi every day? Do you think the people who are working remotely and they put their 100% are more likely to, say, oh, you are not working that much, versus someone working 50% and they have more face-to-face interaction, and the managers might favor them, even though they might even don't realize it, why I'm doing this, but just because of the psychology of having more face-to-face, they think, oh, they are showing up, they are working, but in reality, maybe even they don't work that much, right? The person who works remotely even delivers more, but just because they don't have that face-to-face interaction, that manager might say, this person doesn't work that much. Do you think that might happen?
Definitely, particularly when you don't have very accurate, reliable performance measures, and you have to have a kind of a subjective judgment about how hard the person is working, then the remote working will definitely reduce the accuracy of the judgment by the managers. And I have another very interesting piece of evidence to share with you. When you are predicting behavior of someone in face-to-face, not only are more accurate, you believe that they will do something that may not be the same as you do. But in a video condition, most of our participants predicted the same cooperativeness for the other person that they actually showed, meaning that there's a correlation between how much I believe I am cooperative and how much I believe the other person is cooperative. The same idea can happen for the managers. If I am a person as a manager or as a employee working for another higher level supervisor, if I am a person dedicated to my work, spending a lot of time and effort to do my job, and I'm supervising a bunch of people only remotely, it is very likely I saw them very similar to myself, regardless of how effective or efficient they are. Just because I am effective, I will assume they are effective too. And unfortunately, it happens the other way as well. So if I am not working very hard, I don't like my job, I'm not happy with many kind of aspects, I will see my colleagues in the same light. So I believe that, okay, they are in the same atmosphere. They don't like it either, just like myself. And that's a danger of having a remote team.
That's an interesting point of view. So what you are saying is, if the manager is not as effective as he or she is working remotely, they will judge you the same way that they work. If they are doing less work, they assume that you are also doing less work. But if they are more effective remotely, they are going to assume that you are also working.
It is very likely, yes, to be the case, because it's that kind of we have scientific finding. We measure this in cooperativeness between two strangers, meaning that two people meeting for the first time, they predict how much money the other person will give them. At the same time, they gave some money to the other person, and then the amount that will exchange were very correlated in video condition, but not in face-to-face. This because the underlying mechanism is social prediction in face-to-face and video-to-video. I am very confident it's generalizable to other kind of contexts of social prediction as well. But if you ask me, okay, have you tested this particular context in terms of managers predicting their employees? It hasn't been tested yet, but if I have to bet some money, I will say yes, the managers will have this egocentric prediction of other person when they do evaluation of their subordinates.
I really liked this part of our conversation, but the takeaway for me was if you are a remote worker, you must create those intentional in-person interaction. And if you cannot, for some reason, let's say the team that you are working for is in another country or another state, it's better to at least turn on your camera, because that's a richer channel to get at least close to a face-to-face interaction. With that, let's go to the part 4, which is a better way to ask for a big favor, a raise or promotion, how important the face-to-face interaction is. Let's go to this part. Now, let's go to the new grad students that just got graduated and they are looking for a job and they want to reach out to people for any kind of advice or any sort of informal interviews. How do your findings will help them to use that for setting up this kind of interviews?
So there are 2 steps. So first, you want to reach out to set up the interview. And then second step is that, do you want to have that interview in person or over Zoom or over phone conversation? The first step is a simple case of asking for a resource. So at the very minimum, you are asking that person for their time. Are you available to spend 10, 15 minutes time for me, right? That's a case of help seeking. And then according to what we found, it's much more effective if you ask even that little question face to face. Just show up on the door. I know it's not always possible because sometimes you are living in a different country. But if you can, if it's possible, just show on the door, knock on the door and say that, hi X and Y, hi Prof. I am very interested in your research. I was wondering if we can have a quick chat about your research and possibly about future graduate studies and stuff like that. A few seconds. Most likely they are not available at that moment, but it's much more likely for you to get that appointment for the future if you approach them face to face. And then what we found is for the interview in the second step, you can exchange emails with them. Send you an email, they send you back some emails and stuff like that. But what we found is that richer channels like audio and video still much more effective than text, which is email. So if you have to do it remotely, try to have a Zoom appointment with them or Google Meet appointment with them so that you have a better chance of being more successful in your request, whatever it is. So if you're asking for information, asking for a graduate student position in the future or whatever it is, it works better if you go with a, reacher channels.
Yeah, that actually happened to me. I remember I wanted to sign up for a community that it was, I think, around like $500 for like a one-time payment. And I remember I was like hesitating to do that, but the founder of that association sent me a voice and said, hi Ehsan, I know you are in the waiting list. I saw your request. I know this is going to help you, and I'm okay to give you this kind of discount. And if you want to sign up today. And he said my name. He said about like who I am. And he said, I know you are working at University of Florida. So that kind of making that message personalized. And it wasn't a text-based. It was a voice. So I signed up. I thought this guy put the effort to send me a voice, a personalized voice.
Yeah.
So it's more effective. I saw it on myself firsthand. So yeah, I think that's really more effective. At least if you want to do any sort of like reaching to people, if I do it through a voice or video, a short video, as you said, it has more effectiveness and richer than just a simple text.
Or email, definitely, yes, because it has a lot of paraverbal information in it that the other person can elicit how honest and trustworthy you are, and it affects their reaction. And as you said, at the very minimum, saying that, okay, they have this request is important enough for them to spend extra time, send me a voice or even a video message in a very personalized way to show their sincerity through that richer channel.
Exactly. And my last question for this part is, let's say I want to ask my manager or my boss for a raise or a promotion, something big. What would be the best way to approach this based on your findings? Should I send an email first saying I want to talk about this topic and then do a face-to-face, or just go straight to face-to-face? What would be the best approach for big asks from our coworker or manager?
Very good question. So what we did in our studies were because of the feasibility and the logistics. We looked at a small favor, which is you can either offer right at the moment or you can reject it. When it comes to big favors that require some time from the other person to think about it, to do some arrangement, right? So for example, if you want to have a raise, most likely it's not something that the person can decide on spot. So they need to kind of look at it different angles and make sure that it's feasible. So probably the initial request could be a face-to-face one, but you don't push for the final answer in the same meeting, right? So you're saying that, okay, I'm here to have this conversation and ask you for promotion or raise or whatever you have in mind, a big request or big favor you're asking for. But that's it. Don't push too hard to get the answer right at that moment. But you can also have kind of a soft deadline with a person. Okay, when do you want me to follow up? A week from now, 2 weeks from now, because that would be another request, right? So you have a big request and then you have another request, which is the kind of you are putting a deadline for that other person. Again, it's going to be more effective face to face. So you ask for that deadline and they say, let me see my calendar, blah, blah, blah. And they gave you let's say 2 week deadline. Now you have a good reason to go back there and again meet them face to face in 2 weeks, right? And follow up on the same thing. So it could happen face to face, but not the same session, most likely, because it's something that they need to think and make a decision. So yeah, still face to face, but with a little bit more planning in advance.
So the takeaway from this part was, if something is big to ask, let's say I'm asking for a promotion or a raise in my salary or any sort of big asks, it's better to do it in person. Do not expect to get the answer in that interaction, but secure a clear follow-up. And that's the right way of asking for a request like this. I'm very glad that I talked to Mahdi, and I'm going to put the link of his research lab in the description below. And I hope you learned something from this conversation. See you in the next one.